Hi, Ron.
Hi, Kayla. How you doing?
I'm good, thanks. So, thanks for joining me today. I wanted to bring a topic to kind of the forefront because it's something that me, as well as my team, have been facing over the last, probably more predominantly in the last year or so, but really over the last few years, is that when we're having conversations with our partners about licensing component technology, more often than not, the C-level folks like yourself, the CFOs, are definitely getting involved. But the actual decision makers on the ground floor are oftentimes directors of engineering, product managers. So, one of the questions that they always ask us is, what is the return on investment in utilizing component technology versus developing in-house or utilizing a much lower cost tool out on the market? So that's kind of the focus that we're going to have today during the conversation. And I'm going to ask you a few questions, but if we want to get started with a story that maybe you have and where you've experienced this first and foremost, and then we can get into the questions, that would be awesome.
Sure. Well, we've been doing this 29 years, so we've talked to lots of heads of engineering, as you mentioned, but CEOs and CFOs and CTOs about the decision-making process, when it makes sense to use a component, when it doesn't make sense to use a component. And we're a software company too, so we're making those same build versus buy decisions, which every software developer is going to be faced with. And so, what I'm going to be talking about today is we'll probably stumble upon some examples from
Mhm.
specific companies that we've worked with or from ourselves, but it's really a composite picture of the hundreds of companies we've talked to and worked with.
Absolutely. All right. So, given your experience, you built this company. What would you say the biggest return on investment is utilizing component technology versus building in-house? From a, we have a
Hmm.
team of developers that
Yeah.
we have to make that decision, but also experiences that our partners have encountered as well.
There's I would say, three big pieces of ROI that are a little hard to put in a priority order. I suppose it depends on the company's
Yeah.
situation. But
Yeah.
the first one is, one that's always present, is the development cost. It is always cheaper to license something than to reinvent it. No matter how badly the engineers would love to reinvent it, you're going to need a whole lot of people to reinvent what's already there, what's already proven, what's already working. So the biggest ROI is just how many people would you realistically have to hire?
Yeah.
And realistically, I would triple underline because it will always be underestimated. How many people do you realistically need to hire? How long is that realistically going to take? And how realistic is it that you can actually find that specific expertise and get those people on board in any kind of reasonable time frame? So development cost is number one. But if it takes you a while to hire people, if it takes you a while to ramp them up, and are busy reinventing stuff, there's the speed to market ROI. Time is money. It's going to cost you money while you're developing, but the opportunity cost of not getting a product out there while you're busy reinventing the wheel
Yeah.
is the second biggest ROI. That's the part that's different from company to company. Maybe there's some magical company out there that doesn't have any competition and there's no one else trying to get to market first or trying to get to market faster with these set of capabilities. So there could be a big cost of speed to market. If your competitor beats you there, then it can be really expensive to try to win that share back, that
Right.
mind share and the market
Yeah.
share.
Yeah.
Um, and the third most common ROI is actually, I would just put it all under a bucket of like quality issues, the quality of your product. Quality, when I say quality, I mean a few different things. Number one, the performance. Is it going to be as performant as a competitor that's based on a commonly used component? Is it going to be as stable as your competitor who might be using this commonly used component? Is it going to have all the feature set that a
Right.
component that's been banged on and used and influenced by so many companies
Yes.
over years is going to have? So it's the quality of your product relative to your competition. And one more thing I'd say about quality is that by licensing a component, you can focus on the stuff that really matters, the difference makers. And
Absolutely.
so you have to put all of that into your bucket or your basket of factors to consider as a business owner or a CFO or head of
Absolutely.
engineering.
And one thing that always comes up to me is not only is it upfront development costs, but how long are you wanting to maintain those capabilities and be able to keep up with the speed of new technologies? There's new platforms that are constantly available, drivers, whatever it may be, to have that development know exactly what's coming up next and be able to respond to that. That is a lot of heavy lifting. So all of those pieces kind of come into that decision making to where component technology is typically the best way to go with regards to ROI because let's let you focus on what your secret sauce is. Let us take the heavy lifting off of your shoulders. Makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a great point about, I was talking about speed to market,
Mhm.
and yeah, that matters at first, but then
Yeah.
there's the speed at which you iteratively improve your product.
Yeah. Mhm.
And using a simple example, let's say if we're going to talk about graphics just as one area, and you had a request for a feature of a very complicated kind of cutting plane that your customers wanted to move through the model. If
Yeah.
you've done it yourself, you have to ask your team, hey, can we have a cutting plane that does this very complicated cutting plane, three-sided, cube, whatever it is, and it works like this, and et cetera, and that they have to figure out how to do it. They have to do it. They have to stabilize it. They have to test it, et cetera. If someone's using one of our hoops components, they look at the documentation and they say, oh, I make this one call, figure out how I want the UI to look, and your next release has that feature. So
Right.
it's the speed with which you can iterate your products.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, what are maybe some common objections because you used to sell directly and you still get involved in conversations, but what are some of the most common objections that you run into when it comes to the licensing piece? There's usually not a ton of questions around the technology because I think that we do have premium technologies, but from a business use case or business case of what's that ROI, what are some common objections that you are typically
Yeah.
seeing?
Well, again, we're a software company ourselves. And so when we are thinking about build versus buy, we think about the same things that the companies that we partner with think
Right.
about. And we hope, based on our experience, that we don't fall into some of these traps. But some of the main objections are we can do it better. It's really tempting to listen to a developer who says they can do it better. And there's a lot of good developers out there, but we and other component providers have a massive head start. So it's
Yeah.
not realistic that someone's going to do it better. You might have a situation where your needs are super specific, and
Yeah.
then yeah, maybe you can actually do it better. But there's hundreds of developer years invested in these components, driven by real market needs. This stuff is battle hardened and
Hmm.
refined by heavy usage. So you almost certainly can't do it better. And whatever you think it's gonna, however long you think it's gonna take, it's gonna take 10 times that long. Here's a scenario I've seen many times, especially with visualization and web visualization.
Hmm.
Somebody says, hey CEO, hey CFO, we don't need to spend money on this. I could do this myself. And they pretty quickly have a 3D model spinning on the screen. And they say, see, we're practically there. You're not even 5% there in terms of the robustness and the functionality and the
Right.
handle complex models
Yeah.
and streaming and PMI, and that you're barely there. So be careful, beware of those who say we could do it better. It's possible, but
Yeah.
it's extremely unlikely and very, very hard.
Yeah. And to create an application that has staying power with that kind of capability is tough too. What other common objections would
Yeah,
you run into?
I'd say there's two more common ones. One is we want control of that code. And we'll feel better if we have that code. We feel more comfortable if we have control of that code. And that's fine. It is true. I mean, we feel the same. Hey, if we control that code, but that comes at a cost. It comes at a big cost of developing. We talked already about what all of those costs are, and it comes with some risks. It comes with risks that you don't actually
Yeah.
create something that
Yeah.
that is up to the standard. But the main thing to ask yourself is, do you really want to control everything? I mean, I think there's any application leverages quite a bit of other stuff
Yeah.
in their tech stack from Amazon and elsewhere.
Yeah.
So you already know you don't need to control everything. All you
Mhm.
really need to control is what your something that's so critical that it's a difference maker for your application. I have an example of that. We've been working with SolidWorks for more than 20 years. And when they were building SolidWorks, they said, this is kind of brand new. We're going to be building something for Windows. We want the visualization to be so tightly connected to modeling, et cetera. So they wanted to build their own visualization engine. There's another reason they wanted to, is that the only one on the market was Hoops Visualize, and that was owned by Autodesk at the time. So they weren't going to license from Autodesk. But even if that wasn't the case, they really wanted tight control over that. So they did their own visualization. It's very good standard CAD visualization in the SolidWorks CAD product. But every single product they've built since then, they've chosen not to do the visualization on their own because they developed it, and because they were glad they did. They needed control of that. It was so core. But for products like eDrawings and their MBD product and many others that they work with us on, they realized that actually didn't get us a competitive advantage. Let's just buy instead of build. So there's that control, but ask yourself, what's the cost of that control? And do you really need to control it?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I actually have another example. So Maya, one of our partners, probably more recently in the last 3-ish years. So they are known for creating applications and white labeling them specifically in the CAE space.
Right.
And they wanted to develop a web-based technology, and they chose to utilize a number of our technologies to help speed up their time to market. So they weren't necessarily experts in web visualization or polygonal mesh modeling, but through licensing our components, they were able to reduce the time to market significantly, under a year, to where they had their product out to market. So even with all the expertise they have in-house to develop products, to white label them to other very large names, they came to us for component technologies because that was the most important piece, was getting to market quickly.
Yeah, that's a good example. And I agree. I know them, and they're great. A lot of smart developers. And that's what I would say about smart developers. Smart developers believe they can create anything, and maybe they can, but the smartest developers know what they should be focusing their time on, and what's just reinventing the wheel, for sure. And they're a super good example of that. Probably the last thing we get, which is natural when you're looking at build versus buy, is it's expensive. And we're not the cheapest technologies out there. I mean, the best of anything never is the cheapest thing.
Correct.
And we try to make sure that it's worth it. It's not about the cost, it's about the value. But I think when someone says it's expensive, what we'd encourage them to think about is compared to what? Compared to hiring developers and how many people you're really going to need and how long that's going to take, compared to what's the true cost of delays getting to market, or the true cost of always playing catch up to your competitors that are using components. What's the cost of one lost deal because you chose the second best translators, and now that they can't read in this, your potential customer can't read in these particular files, and you lost the deal, $50K deal, $100K deal, $1 million deal. What's the cost of that? So when someone says it's expensive, which agreed, it's not cheap, they should ask themselves, compared to what?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a question that I ask pretty regularly of my partners whenever I'm chatting with them. And usually it's a compelling question. And it's something that not only the directors of engineering should be asking, but they should be asking the CFO, the CEO, to really get their kind of the gears working, to be like, oh, let's put this in perspective, because we need to get something out to market quickly, but we also need to make sure that we are, keeping our customer base, adding to our customer base, and making sure we're getting a product out to market as efficiently as possible.
For sure.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, do you have anything else to add?
I would say, a clear-eyed look at really what your options are. what the upsides are, what the downsides are, but don't forget to look at risk. That's one of the nice things about companies with CFOs is that they think about the risk. So the risk of developing something that doesn't meet user expectations. Now you've hired people, you've paid them, you spend a bunch of time, and it's not proven, and so it's not proven, and it goes out there and it doesn't actually deliver what the market is expecting. What's the risk of missing your market window, getting beaten to market? Like having somebody calculate that. But there's also risk of things like turnover. If you develop something that's entirely homegrown and you have a small team that works on it and they get you the basics of what you need, and then those people leave, that's code that only they know about. But when you're working with a proven component, there's a community of developers, there's documentation and learning tools and sample code. So it insulates you some from the inevitable turnover in your team.
I do have an example. I actually have an example of kind of
an example
an
of all
aging, for like an aging engineering population. We have products that have been using our tools for 20. I just looked at a contract the other day. I think it was from 1993 or 4. It was very old. And obviously those developers that created that application, they are no longer around, or they are to the point where they're about to retire. So there's new developers coming into the market. Having the ability to have the component technology provider come in, give that training, have them understand, okay, we're with you for the long haul. We have partnerships that have lasted sometimes 20 plus years. That is really compelling and does reduce a significant amount of risk, and having someone kind of be with you through for the long haul is really impactful. So, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned one of the other risks earlier about changes in the tech stack.
Yeah.
That's a risk. If you develop for today's technology, today's hardware, today's whatever it is, and that changes, you're kind of stuck and you have to completely redo it. Whereas for the most part, component providers are delivering something that is meant to insulate you from that, or they have teams already working on porting things to the next operating system or porting things to the next device. You can kind of outsource all of that the same way you outsource the development. You're outsourcing a lot of your QA to the component provider. We could probably both talk about this and stories about this all day.
We could, but luckily we won't make this video too long.
We want people to watch it.
We do want people to watch it, but thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
I really appreciate it. I love chatting with you and your experiences that you've had. So thank you so much. And hopefully we'll have more content like this coming around ROI and utilizing component technologies. But feel free to reach out to me or Ron if you have any questions.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Thanks.